Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I'm Molly Starback from the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and we are very pleased to welcome you to one of our discussions on the academic job search. You can find a bunch more archived panel discussions at the Academic Job Search website. I'm sure that you've all received notices about it from either my office or from our co-sponsors in the graduate school and the Duke Graduate Career Services. And if not, you can email me, Molly Starback, and I'll be happy to send you more information. So today's discussion is on non-faculty careers in academia for science PhDs. And I'd like to begin by thanking our panelists for taking the time out of their very busy schedule to come today. This is actually rescheduled because the last time we had to have it, what did it do? It snowed, it sleeted, there was a tornado, something. Yeah, so this is twice now that they've put this on their schedules. So our panelists are Stephanie Friel, who is the Associate Director of Outreach and Mentorship for the Duke Office of Clinical Research. Devin Gillette, who is the Program Director for the Duke BioCore program in the School of Medicine. Jenny Reineke Craven, who is Research Development Associate for the Duke Office of Research Development. And Jory Weintraub, who is the Science Communication Director for the Duke Initiative for Science and Society. Jory is a UNC fan who would like to remind you that he's playing at noon today. So just wanted to get that out there, Jory.
Thank you. I was going to mention it anyway.
I think you were. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves briefly and fill us in on their backgrounds, and then we'll start with questions. A lot of you submitted questions online, so thanks for that. So we will get the ball rolling with these questions, but feel free to chime in if you have other questions for our panelists. So, would you like to start, Stephanie?
Sure. So as Molly mentioned, I'm Stephanie Friel. I'm trained in basic sciences, so I got my PhD at UNC in HIV virology, and I was studying compartmentalization, so at that point very much on the virus side of things. Came to Duke as a postdoc and studied more the immunology side, but still within the HIV research world. And then I went to industry, and it was a small startup company. Well, not exactly startup. It had been around for about 13 years at the point where I started it. But that was also in that sort of basic science world. But it was a small group that was developing assays to get at more physiologically relevant assessments of what our drugs were able to do. And then that company went very much the way as many other companies did at that time. So that was 2007, and it went under, and I came back to Duke. And at that time, there were a lot of questions, regarding what career paths were available to me. As you may have heard, it's very difficult to re-enter academia from industry. So I was able to talk with my old postdoc mentor, and she was able to create a position in sort of that assay design area that I liked so well to come back. And I was there doing, straight up research for quite a while, managing a small team. And some opportunities arose to get more into administration, grant writing, and developing of programs to help career development for junior faculty. So I took the leap at that point in time. That was 2012. So I entered into the Office of Faculty Mentoring. And from there, I learned an awful lot about administration and sort of the lives of faculty here at Duke and their needs. And the services available and the services that need to be available to them. And just this year in January, I started a new position in the Office of Clinical Research, which I have never done clinical research before, so it was a great opportunity for me to learn about that world as well and add it on to the basic science background that I had. That's me.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Devin Gillette, and I'm the director of Duke's IMSD program called BioCore. Has anybody heard of BioCore? I see one of my BioCore scholars in the room, so I won't push him out. So BioCore is a grant that Duke received in 2013. It's like a $2.1 million grant from NIH. So in NIGMS, there's a sector called IMSD, the Initiative for Maximizing Student Development. So they realized that we're doing a fantastic job in the sciences with training students to be to be sufficient and be able to run experiments, think critically, but we really don't do a good job with trying to make sure we have a lot of program development and program support for the student to be able to succeed in graduate school and elsewhere. So with this grant, it's an institutional grant, so we're working within the School of Medicine, Nicholas School for the Environment, Trinity, and what we do is we have a number of scholars on the undergraduate side and graduate student side where we give them professional development, we get them into lab placement, we give them early starts, so they come to the university about a month ahead of time for an early rotation, a lot of community and cohort building, and then also we have a faculty affiliate piece. So 180 faculty members at Duke have self-affiliated, saying they're willing to take students into their lab. They host a lot of the programming for us, all these things. So it's a modge podge of mixing administration, making sure our grant stays afloat, working with students, doing mentoring, running programs, and also academically supporting our students and helping them with any kind of scientific issues that they're having. So I can talk more about that later, but I'll kind of go back to the beginning. So my training is in immunology and microbiology. So I have my PhD from The Ohio State University. And there I looked at the characterization of inadequate host responses to intracellular gram-negative pathogens. So I worked on BSL-3, Francisella tularensis, and Focolaria sinusopacia. And from there, I always did what I liked, but I didn't know that you could make a career of it. So I was really interested in recruiting, very interested in a lot of the programming, administrative piece, but I always thought that had to be paired with a heavy scientific career. I never knew that you can have an actual career based specifically off of those administrative tasks that I was really involved in. So I did a lot as a student. I was involved with recruitment. So every time students came, I would kind of assist with the recruitment, work with the department in that capacity. I also served on admissions committees for our post-bac program, so students trying to get that extra year of training. Ohio State had post-bac programs, so I was on the admissions committee with faculty members there. I was involved with recruiting on a national level, so there's these two major conferences called ABRACAMS and SACNAS that Duke goes every single year, every single institution, especially if they're interested in increasing the participants that they have in science, go to these conferences. So they always bring student recruiters to kind of talk about from the ground level perspective of how your experiences are at that institution. So I went on behalf of Ohio State twice, and I also was involved with their summer research program. So I did a lot with the summer research program with the orientation committee, getting students acclimated to campus. So those were the things I like to do, but then after that, I still didn't know what to do. So like everybody else, I was like, I'll do a postdoc too. So I did go to UNC, so my heart's split as well. So I did a postdoc for a year at UNC in the sepsis lab in the microbiology department. But while I was there, I continued to make sure I broadcast what I really liked. And UNC has a fantastic office for biomedical graduate education, which has about 5 or 6 PhD level scientists who are actually running IMSD programs, running post-bac programs, running career development offices. And I just made sure I talked to them and let them know the entire time how interested I was in this career. And I was just kind of exposed. I really believe in career exploration and seeing what's out there and seeing where you can fill in your passion with your excellence and your expertise. So after communicating with them, I made sure they knew what I really wanted to do. So they, when they heard about opportunities here at Duke, they made sure to let me know or put me in place with people that were influential. So then I started my academic career at Duke in 2014. I was a program coordinator for the Office of Biomedical Graduate Diversity, run by Sherilyn Black, and then also the BioCore office. So I was a split coordinator for both offices. And then in August of 2015, I was promoted to the director of the BioCore office. So now I'm here.
Hi, I'm Jenny Reineke, Craven. I work in the Office of Research Development here at Duke, and the primary charge of that office is to facilitate the development of large complex grants like program project grants or center grants. And these grants are typically about 7 times the size of a standard R01, and they're multidisciplinary, so they involve bringing together experts in different areas across the School of Medicine to work together. My background is also as a basic scientist. I was trained in genetics at NC State, and my focus there was plant genetics, actually population and quantitative genetics, which is a far cry away from the med school where I am now. But I was always interested in science very broadly, and I was always talking with other graduate students about their projects and faculty members about new ideas. And that was something that I recognized early on was a big thing for me, was that love of multidisciplinary science and exploring new resources, new opportunities, how to bring new ideas together. And when I headed out for my first postdoc, I sought to do that. I worked in a collaboration between an evolutionary geneticist and a human population geneticist to explore the development of a new tool at the intersection of those fields. And then I switched fields again to explore gene networks and yeast evolution because I really was interested in that time in getting into the nitty-gritty functional consequences of genetic variants. So as I was halfway through my second postdoc, I started realizing that I hadn't really committed myself wholeheartedly to sort of one main driving research program that I could really start on as a foundation for an academic career, and I was still feeling myself pulled in a lot of different directions and different interests. And I started thinking about alternative careers where I could use that to my advantage instead of having it be something that I was struggling to overcome. And so I started looking, I talked with Molly, I started looking, I signed up to job lists to see what was kind of available in the area, and there really wasn't much, and I was starting to get really nervous about what the next step for me was going to be. And there were a few areas where I thought maybe if I worked and got some experience I could move that way, but there were several of them and they were all kind of carrying equal weight with me, so I didn't again feel committed to committing myself to one area to develop skills. And I saw this job for Research Development Associate come up on the postdoc listserv, and I read the job description, and it was the first job that I had seen where I felt like it would be so easy to write a cover letter explaining my skills and my fit for the position and my interest in the position, and it was natural. So I kind of fell into it that way. I was very lucky to be offered the position. I was the first associate hired by our office, so I got to help Joanna Downer, who was director of the office and is now associate dean for research development, sort of grow and build that effort across the school. And it's been very rewarding. Most of our time again is spent working with teams. We're in research meetings, talking to people about their research, trying to connect them to any missing resources, and then doing scientific editing to make sure the grant is the highest quality that it can be in this funding climate. A grant has to be nearly perfect to get funded. So we work with the teams on these big grants to make sure there are consistent messages throughout, and that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Great, good morning. So I'm Jory Weintraub, and I'm the Science Communication Director with a group that's a sort of a new group on campus that maybe some of you have heard of. We're called the Duke Initiative for Science and Society. Let's see, where's my story? I'll start with undergrad. So when I finished undergrad, I was one of those people who just wasn't ready to go right into grad school. So I took several years off, about 5 years, and for a lot of that time I worked in labs as a technician at the university where I had been an undergrad. And I got a pretty good sense of what the life of a PI in a lab at a university was like, and realized pretty quickly that that wasn't the life that I wanted. So I knew, before I even went to grad school that was not the path I was interested in following. I knew I was interested in doing something with science, and that I had general interest in communicating science and teaching and outreach and things like that. And I sort of felt that really to do what I wanted to do, even though I didn't really know what I wanted to do, I felt like I needed an advanced degree just to sort of open doors and get me to that next level. So I applied to PhD programs, of course, without telling any of the committees that I had no interest in following in their footsteps and becoming a PI. And ended up at UNC Chapel Hill in the immunology department. And as an aside, I noticed that 3 of the 4 of us here are immunologists, and I'm not sure what that says about the field of immunology. It drives people away from the traditional path, but hopefully our sample size is small enough that it's just an anomaly. But I actually loved being in grad school. I really enjoyed doing the research and my time on the bench, but I think a big part of that was because I knew that I wasn't going to be doing it for the next 40 years, So it was really a means to an end for me. And I even as I was finishing up grad school, I really wasn't sure what the next step was. I applied for a few traditional postdocs just because, you need a job and that's what I was qualified to do. And then I just got really lucky and I guess it was good timing, but I happened to find an opportunity still at UNC where I was to do a postdoc in science education, STEM education, and mostly focusing on outreach to underrepresented minorities, which had always been a really strong interest of mine. And so this was an opportunity to actually be a postdoc and do the exact kind of work that I wanted to do. So I went into that postdoc, and the postdoc lasted 3 years. The position ended up being about 5 or 6 years because I stayed on and continued to run minority outreach programs at UNC and do a lot of undergraduate teaching while I was there. And I loved what I was doing there. And then in 2005, I heard about a position here at Duke. There was a new center that was just opening up at the time that had just been funded called NESCENT, which some of you may be familiar with, the National Evolutionary Synthesis Center. And so I was coming, from a purely biomedical background. I had no real background in evolution at all, but they were just funded by the NSF and were looking for someone to run the outreach. And I thought, well, I'm totally unqualified to do outreach for an evolution center, but why not apply, just for fun? It sounded like a fun job, so I figured I would do it. And for whatever crazy reason, they hired me to do that. And so for the next nearly 11 years, I ran the outreach at an evolution center. It was the most fun job I've ever had. It was a blast. And I got to meet Katie doing it. So I always like calling her out when she's in the audience. It's fun to make her blush. But it was great. And unfortunately, being an NSF-funded center, all good things funded by the NSF eventually come to an end. And so our funding ended last June, and then I transitioned into my current position, which is Science Communication Director for Science and Society Initiative. So in this job, I teach science communication courses for undergrads and master's students and PhD students, and I run workshops for Duke faculty and postdocs and how to communicate your science effectively to not obviously to your peers, because you're all good at doing that, but to audiences that maybe you don't have as much experience communicating your science to, the general public, policymakers, the media, things like that. And it's been really fun. And I guess the one last thing I want to say, that maybe you've sort of noticed this pattern as I've described this weird circuitous path I followed, is that I feel like my career has been sort of punctuated by these weird transitions to new positions that I, by all rights, had no right to get or had no qualifications to do. Transition from bench science to science education, and then from biomedical science to evolution, and now I'm doing science communication, even though I don't consider myself primarily a science communicator. And so I think the common theme is that I've just sort of gone for opportunities that sounded fun and interesting, without thinking that there's no way in hell I'm going to get this job. And I certainly have applied for plenty of jobs that I haven't gotten as well. So, but I've had a really fun path, and I feel fortunate that I've enjoyed pretty much everything I've done throughout my career. So,
Great. Thanks very much. Those are excellent introductions. So some of you mentioned this a little bit. What recommendations would you have for a postdoc or graduate student who currently is doing bench research and kind of has a feeling like, oh, I don't think I want to do this forever? So like, Devin, you mentioned going to ABACAMS, SACNAS. Do you have recommendations for people who are in these positions right now who want to move into jobs like yours?
I kind of briefly mentioned it before, but I think for me, one of the hardest parts was finding that job. Like seeing someone, like you were saying when you read the program description, you're like, wow, that's exactly what I want to do. So I'm really big into just exploring everything. So coming to seminars like this, going onto different websites and a lot of different institutions. For instance, University of Chicago and UNC have very great websites about different careers and what you can do with a PhD. So just kind of, first of all, I think the first step will be trying to see what is the most interest of you as far as reading a description. Then from there, seeing people, looking at the profiles of people that have those positions and kind of seeing their trajectory and what they've done. But I think the major thing is trying to gain some type of experience. And it's interesting, I went to a workshop building class with our undergrads in career services, and they were saying, the lady had a story about how she had to work for like a bank, and she had to dress up in like a big frog suit and like kind of like dance around and stuff like that. But she said, she was like, I learned so much about interacting with people and leadership and all these skills, right, that are just really attractive to employers. So I think sometimes it would be great if you could have an internship in that field, but if not, if you do anything that you can figure out a way to construct a language and a narrative on how it would be applicable to the area that you want to go into, I think it's worth a shot. I think it's worth taking advantage of any opportunity that you think may possibly have something to do with what you want to do, or if not, will teach you a very important skill that you can apply to the areas that you're interested in. Probably my spill. So.
I think I would add to that and say, it's hard to envision a direct path towards where you want to go because a lot of the jobs like we have, there is only one program director for BioCore, you know, and there's only one person in the position I have. It's not like there's a cadre of people doing this particular job. There are similar jobs. So a lot of it is figuring out what is it that you really enjoy at its core. You know, for me, what I discovered is that, like Jenny, I love science, but I don't love that one particular aspect of science that I can build my own research program on. So I found a way to still be intimately involved in science and making science better and doing these sort of pragmatic, strategic, logistical kinds of things puzzle solving that I really enjoy and still learn a lot about science. And so if you really find out what it is at your core that you're good at, that you enjoy doing, you can hone those skills. You can find out who does similar types of activities and network in that way. Because it does often come down to who you know, just like it does in your standard research science. It's just you need to know different people to find those opportunities.
I'd add to that too. Don't be shy about making your interests known if you have them to your PI, to other people. Talk about it. Devin mentioned doing that. That will open doors for you. And also, be willing to go above and beyond and take on additional responsibilities, even if you don't directly see the relevance to you. A lot of us get very focused in the lab. You know, we have to make progress. We have deadlines. The PI has these expectations and so forth. But taking on additional roles is really important. I know in my job, coming into it, I thought that I knew how to juggle multiple responsibilities. I had no idea what juggling multiple responsibilities and timelines and so forth really was. So give yourself the opportunity to explore those types of things.
Yeah, so that's all great advice, and I would echo all of that. I would add maybe something that I think would be useful is, I think the climate for people who want to do things other than the traditional path of being a PI, running your own lab, I think it's become much better, certainly than it was 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago when I was in grad school. And it was really frowned upon. I mean, you know, if you wanted to do something other than run your own lab, you sort of had to be secretive about it and sneak around behind your PI's back or your advisor's back and go to the, you know, even if you could find a seminar or a workshop, which there weren't many of them. So the good news is that it's become more openly discussed, and there's a lot more support for it, and there's a lot more opportunities. I think that the bad news is that there's a lot of you that are interested in this path, and so while there's more opportunities, there's also, I think, more of a sense of, I don't want to use the word competition, because, well, but you know what I'm saying. So I think it's easy enough to go to seminars and to participate in outreach days and things like that. I think it's getting to the point now where what's going to make more of a difference is not just sort of someone else is organizing an outreach day and you participate, which is good and you should do it, but think about what can you create or contribute that's new and novel and hasn't been done before. And you know, it doesn't have to be a world-changing thing, but just something that's a unique addition. Just like when you're in the lab and you want to come up with some novel scientific question. You know, if you want to do outreach, if you want to do communication, if you know, whatever path you want to follow, you need to, you know, sort of think about how you can start carving out your own little niche and come up with something unique and innovative. So that's something to think about. And then I would also just reiterate what I said in my intro, which is, you know, just if something sounds interesting, go for it. And don't worry if you feel like on paper you're not perfectly qualified. Because, you know, Stephanie made the really good point, I think, that, you know, that there is not necessarily that perfect job that, exactly fits what you want to do. So a lot of times it's a matter of just, sort of stretching yourself a little bit, pushing yourself in directions that you might not have thought you would go. And, if you get lucky, like I have, you end up in jobs that you wouldn't have anticipated that you end up really loving. So.
Well, I have to stop you there, Jory. Like, a couple of you mentioned getting lucky, and I know that you all have not just gotten lucky. You weren't just sitting around and like the job fell out of the sky, right? You all have great networks, I believe. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know it's, people always want to say like, I got lucky because it's, you don't want to blow your own horn, but you guys also like made sure you were in the right place at the right time and talking to the right people, right?
Yeah, and I think part of it gets at what both Jenny and Jory were saying, is that you have this niche building as well. So if you are the person in your lab that does web design and made this great lab page for your lab, and then all of a sudden somebody down the hallway is trying to build something and someone goes, oh, well, look at that lab because they have a really great one, and your PI says, well, that was so-and-so that built that. You become known for that skill set, and if you can build a couple of those, you become known for what you enjoy doing and what you do best. And for networking too, I mean, for me, I was just sort of pitching in here and there for random things, and Sally Kornbluth was working on a new project and said, I'd like to kind of go in this direction that I know nothing about and do this HIV project. Maybe Stephanie could look at this grant and give me some feedback. And so I did, and then half a year later, she had some other obligations and wanted to hire a grant writer, and said, that was a really good working relationship, so let me just touch base and see if she's at all interested in coming up with some effort for that. And it wasn't a full-time position, and I said, well, I would love to do that, but I need a full-time job. And she said, well, I know somebody who's developing this new program, and you like that sort of thing. And it worked out into a full job, and that was my entry into administration. So it's very kind of, it's networking and feels like happenstance, but when you look back, it really isn't, because it's based on the skill sets that you built and made known to people around you.
Yeah, that really resonated with me because a lot of the opportunities that I have now are based off of these really teeny tiny interactions that I didn't take for granted. So that's one of my take-home messages is you don't always have to network with the big wigs, right? It's not the small people, but it's everybody that you interact with, even if it's quickly, even if it's one of the panelists here, these things really matter. So 2 interesting stories is when I was an undergrad, I actually did the Duke summer research program here. So I left my institution and came to Duke for the summer and worked in a lab. And I was in this principal investigator's lab named Beverly Fermore, and she said her husband was really interested in diversity initiatives and students from underrepresented background. He was really involved with it. His name was Ken Cruiser. He works at Duke. He retired just not long ago, and he was one of the PIs to the BioCorps grant, so that's down the line. But anyway, so she said, well, can we just go to lunch? And, my husband really wants to meet you because I've told him all these great things about you. I'm like a kid, right? So I'm like, whatever, free lunch. I go there and I interact with Ken, and it's literally just one lunch, and I don't take advantage. I'm not thinking in that fashion because I'm like a junior or sophomore or something. But then as I went to the Abercane's meeting, I would always stop at the Duke table because they were there, and I would see, Dr. Cruiser. And I was, hey, Dr. Cruiser. We would chit-chat. So then I'll kind of put that to the side. And then another interaction I had was with the current IMSD director at UNC, Ashala Freeman, and she was doing a postdoc at my undergrad institution, and I was working in one of the research labs, so we were literally walking down the hallway, and my PI at the time was like, oh, do you know Ashala? I said, no, I don't know Ashala. She said, oh, she's at UNC, blah, blah, blah. She gave me her business card. I was also, this is when I was not thinking as an undergrad, so I was like, a cool new phone number to put in my phone. So I saved everybody's phone number, with business cards. So then years later, I was like, I really want to get back into the Triangle because I'm from South Carolina, so I want to get back over here. So I go looking through my phone, and I see this Ashala's name pops up from UNC. I said, who was that lady? I said, oh my gosh, that was the lady I met in the hallway that time. And I looked her name up, and she was running the IMSD program at UNC, and I was like, oh my gosh, she does exactly what I want to do. So I began to network with her, and that network turned into, a good working relationship. So then when I was at UNC, there was a symposium they had with all of the IMSD and PrEP programs in the region, and it was at UNC at that time. And she said, because I hadn't been communicating with her and telling her what I was interested in, I said, she said, oh, Devin, would you like to run, we're having these small table, like round table discussions, would you like to be the table facilitator? And I was like, I guess. So like, I'm facilitating the table, and of course she strategically places Ken Cruiser at that table because she knows that Duke has a position open. She knows they're looking for someone. So while I'm just talking to the students, kind of, facilitating the conversation, getting everything going, and then I eventually have to, broadcast to the group what our group discussed. All those times, those small interactions with Ken, of him seeing me throughout the years, of me just being involved in little things here and there, the interactions with the Shala, they all merge, right, really nicely into that one encounter. So then when I was looking for jobs here, Ken could really vouch for me. He said, oh my gosh, I went to a conference and, she did a great job facilitating and working with the students and getting the ideas across. I think we should, because I hadn't had any formal experience in administration besides these small interactions, but the take-home message is, whether going to lunch with someone, whether you're passing them in the hall, you never know how instrumental these people will be as you push your career along. So just make sure every interaction you have, you value it, you stay in contact with everyone, even if it seems like they might not be in this position now. It's just so important to make sure you always, you never burn bridges, you always have good relationships with people because you never know how that propels you into that next step.
Any thoughts?
I know for me, a lot of it was just being that person in the lab who everyone wanted to look at their talk before they gave the presentation at the conference or review their latest manuscript, and gaining a reputation for being helpful in that regard. Also attending national meetings, making connections there, those things opened the door for me to do things like be an ad hoc reviewer for several journals. And I recognized that I had an interest and aptitude for editing and improving written documents in science, and so I was a contract editor with American Journal Experts. And so those were things on my CV when I applied for this job that resonated in my heart as being a good fit that kind of helped set me apart from others. So just following your interests, looking for those opportunities to explore them and create even those, like Devin was saying, just even those little moments that give you something to talk about in the interview to demonstrate that you've been thinking about this or you've had some relevant experience. That's important.
Yeah, so again, I have the easy job because they're saying all the good stuff. And I get to come in at the end and sweep up. But no, everything I said is absolutely true. You're going to hear this all the time, and I'm sure it's true in any profession. But the network you create and you cultivate is probably the most important thing that you can do. The thing is, to make sweeping generalizations here, a lot of people in science and engineering tend to not necessarily be the most extroverted, schmoozy kind of people. I certainly am not that way, and so it sometimes feels like a little bit more work maybe than you're used to doing. Certainly if you've sort of been in the lab working on your own little project in isolation for a long time, but it really is worth the effort, and even if it's just the little things like Devin said. The last point I'll make on that is that just like any other job, all of us up here are have too much work to do and not enough time to do it, and if we have, if I have a position that I'm trying to fill, everyone in this room is brilliant and hardworking and would be great in that position, but, I don't have the time to, interview 500 people, right? So you're going to sort of default to the people you've met, even if it's briefly, even if it's a brief interaction, or, I would say, send an email to Devin and say, hey, I have this position, someone would be good. So it's always about, for me, it's how lazy I am, and I'm just trying to make it easier for myself, right? And, sort of the path of least resistance to finding someone who's going to be really good, and without having to dig through 500 resumes. So that's why I think the network is so crucial, is that it really will open doors for you, and can make all the difference in the world. So.
Do we have any questions from the audience at this point? Yes,
I just have a follow-up question on this. As Stephanie said, that specifically at these positions when it's a whole department and one opens up, and also Molly had organized all of these seminars since I started my postdoc at Duke. And this kind of positions, when you talk to the people who have the jobs, it seems that they were highly qualified. They had all these skills, but these are very specialized positions, and it was mostly created for them. So I don't know, is it even possible to get these positions by simply going to the HR website and applying to them, even though you have all the skills? If these are created specifically for people that, they know them for 4 or 5 years, and they just have to advertise it because it has to advertise.
Yeah, I think that does happen, and they do that to make it, a level playing field. So I think in that situation, you have to have the skills to outshine someone that they know and they're comfortable with, they know has the skill set that's been demonstrated over time, they have that strong, long-lasting relationship. There are many positions, I think, that are created that don't fit that scenario that you described, but some, I think, are. And that's a challenge for those specific positions.
And we have several positions open in DACA right now that are more the traditional, here's an open position, we're taking all comers. And I can tell you in those situations where it really is that first interaction, is that paper submission of your CV through HR, the things that make the biggest difference in our situation is seeing enthusiasm. So if I'm meeting with 2 people that have exactly the same qualifications, or one may be even slightly more what we thought we were looking for, but when I talk with them, one is either telling me about the job they're running away from, which is more often the case than you would like to see, or they're just talking about their qualifications, and the other one is asking questions, how they can contribute, they're showing enthusiasm, they have, even with limited knowledge, a sense of vision of where they think their role in the organization is. That can be make or break in those scenarios. And then the follow-up, if we have a nice interview with someone and we don't hear from them the next day, that's kind of a red flag. So we really expect someone, and again, it's all about, is this person going to take the initiative to really make this role something great? And we want to see them come back and say, I had a great time talking with you, I've got some more ideas, maybe more questions. That's what I've seen that really makes a difference when we're looking at people for administrative roles.
I have one more thing to add, and that is I think a lot of those positions that are created for somebody are relatively higher level positions, and you may need to open yourself up to getting your foot in the door at a lower level position, and then demonstrating that you can excel at that and do more, and then opportunities will be created for you to move up and out after you get in the door.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're created on, here are the needs I see in my environment, and I know that this person who's awesome at it. That's how those get created. But if they don't know that you're awesome at filling that need that they have, that connection will likely not be made.
And just to be the third person to take that point home, it is so true. You just it is so tough because you're in a training phase now, right? Postdoc or a graduate student going to a postdoc. But if you want to go into a different field, just like the training phase is set up for you to go into as a faculty member through the postdoc, sometimes you have to make a training phase. So like for me, I was a coordinator. So when I graduated, did I expect to be a coordinator? Like after I left the postdoc? No, but I knew that the coordinating experiences I would not have been successful as a director if I didn't have coordinating experience and learning from the ground, from the bottom, how this entire field works because it's new. And if you have this director type of position, sometimes, like the admissions committee, it can be difficult for them to see someone who has all these traits, but if they just don't have the experience, they don't want to set you up for failure either, So it's important to kind of humble yourself in a sense. And when you're first looking for some of those jobs, seeing what positions are out there that will be, our version of entry-level positions into a field if you have to. And be okay with that because it's okay. And everyone that I've known that have gone into coordinator positions, postdoc positions, and administrative roles are now at director level positions. So I really think it's just a training phase that, our version of a training phase.
Yeah, and I think, you make a really good point, which is that I think a lot of positions that are out there, they probably do have someone in mind. If it's not created for a specific person, at least they have someone or a small group of people in mind. And that's just the reality, and that can be frustrating, and it's probably that way in any career path. You need that first foot in the door type of thing. But again, I would just point out that this comes back to our previous point, which is this is where your network is so important, because just knowing someone, even if you haven't worked with them for 5 years, but just when they know your name, sometimes that's enough to be that foot in the door and to set you apart even just a little bit from the other 50 people that are applying. So.
And the last little point is just apply anyway. Like, because if you
Yeah,
see
oh,
it,
yeah.
because then they'll see your name. They might even be able to read and say, wow, this person doesn't have experience in that area, but they have a lot of things to set them up. They could interview and get to know you that way, and now you know all the leadership people in that role. So if you see something that's interesting across the board, always apply for it, because it gives you experience for the application process, and also that can be the beginning in the building of the network for that position. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And sometimes you may not be perfectly qualified for that position, but they may have a position that they haven't posted yet, or they've been thinking about a position, or they may just see what's on your resume and think, well, that's really interesting. If we could get some money, it'd be great to create a position that would require those skills. So you never know. I mean, it's one of those cliches where you don't hit a home run if you don't go up to bat. So you got to try.
Yeah, you've got to be really comfortable with risk in general, or any leaps from science into administrative positions, because generally speaking, there's no onboarding process. There may be a little bit of get you set up with your IT, but then it's like, okay, we hired you for this position because you had some ideas. Okay, go, do it. So, yeah, you have to be really comfortable with the idea that you may kind of have to find your own way even once you have the job.
She's heading out to build up her network right now. Awesome.
So, other questions from the audience? Yes.
How can you gauge the job opportunities for the particular niche that you have developed? Like, you might develop a niche and then you might find that they're not really great job opportunities. There might be one or two, but how do you gauge that really the job opportunities available in the market, a particular niche?
I think the answer to that question might vary depending on the specific instance. I know, for research development, you would talk to different groups that are doing that stuff now, find out about opportunities, find out if there's growth potential in that field, where it is, what they see the most likely emerging issues to be. There's also a national organization that you can connect to find out about those job opportunities and see what chatter in the field is. So from my perspective, that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a tough question, but I think it's a good opportunity to raise a point which usually comes up in these types of discussions and has been mentioned briefly already, which is the training that you're getting as a graduate student or as a postdoc. A lot of times people feel, well, I've invested so much in developing this specific set of skills. I mean, I spend all my time working on a flow cytometer or whatever, how's that going to apply? But one of you made the point that, you didn't know what it was like to multitask. Yeah. Until you, started doing this job. But what you're learning as a graduate student or as a postdoc is really applicable. And, you shouldn't feel like, oh, well, I've wasted 5 years or 8 years doing this very specified thing, because, you are learning how to work on multiple projects and how to work in collaborative teams. Hopefully you're doing all those things, and how to communicate what you're doing to a broader audience, and all of these things. All of these skills are skills that apply to any of the jobs that we do. And, I feel confident saying that none of us would do our job if we didn't have these skills in multitasking and working collaboratively with other groups and things like that. So, don't necessarily think that you have to have the exact skills that position calls for. Think in terms of how to present yourself as someone who's taken all these experiences that you've developed in the lab as a postdoc, as a grad student, and how you can sort of repurpose those and apply them to any challenging situation that requires troubleshooting skills and critical thinking and communication skills and all of those things that you do as grad students and postdocs.
Do you find, like, in your respective fields, which are pretty diverse, that you as like a PhD track person that's now switching to something new are mostly competing with people who have gone a more direct route to your career track? Like are a lot of the people like that you're applying with, like maybe Jory, there are people who have like a master's in science and a PhD in like education or like something, like are you finding that you're leveraging your PhD somehow, or that a lot of the people that you're competing with for jobs maybe have more specific skill sets in your field?
I'm just going to jump in right here and say I don't think that there's any traditional path to any of the jobs that we do. You know, it's I think people doing the kinds of jobs that we do are coming from all different backgrounds with all different types of experience, and you know, it's all about thinking about how to package yourself and market yourself and your skills. But you know, there's no training program to get you to the point where I am now. It's just sort of you have to do different jobs and build different skills. So I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, in mine, for sure, it's not that sort of standard competition in a sense, because the folks that I work with, there's nurses, there's lawyers, there's a couple of PhDs. More often than not, folks that have kind of the same level of position within my organization don't have any of that. So the having the PhD did not either hurt me or bring me a competitive edge in that sense. But having had the PhD training, I think, was very valuable for the job that I do, because my job works a lot with interfacing with faculty, especially junior faculty. So I understand their training path, I understand their challenges, their burdens, the gaps and needs of resources that they have, in a way that someone who didn't have that training would have a harder time understanding. And also, another kind of side benefit of having PhD training that I've noticed is, you know, it's tough. It gives you very thick skin, so you're perhaps a little better equipped to deal with some of the client service types of interactions that we have that may not be as positive. So I think that that training did help me functionally, but on paper, you know, just comparing, it didn't really impact my ability to secure the job in the first place.
Yeah, I think what Stephanie said about the credibility is really important. I think, especially working in an academic setting with faculty members, I think they shouldn't, but I think they value someone with a PhD, especially in hard sciences. They look at them a little bit differently because they know they can understand those day-to-day struggles that they have being a faculty member of the research. Especially with students, I've realized that having a scientific background makes it easy to relate to them a little bit better. So if they're going through their prelim or they're writing their dissertation, like I've had a prelim, I've had I've written my dissertation, so I can relate to them in that capacity better as opposed to somebody who's never gone through that before. And then lastly, I think I've realized that even though administration is a tough field, I think it's easier to learn learn how to do administrative tasks as opposed to learning science. All right, you can't, like, if your training is in administration, but then you're trying to communicate science or something that is just a huge field, is very difficult to learn. I think it's been more of a challenge than the other way around of being a scientist, but learning now to compile a grant and how to, submit renewals and all these type of things. You learn those things kind of like being thrown into the job. You just learn them, but it's because of the training you had in that hard science field, that PhD training. I think it makes it a bit easier. Not easy, easier.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of the things they've said as well, and there wouldn't be, I think, an ideal direct path for a research development career. Having some research administration experience coupled with experience in day-to-day science in the lab, working with an array of different research teams in different research cultures and environments, and having strong communications background are all critical. And I think it's more of a temperament or personality type that is going to excel in this type of job. And that's not something that others have talked about or considered, but you have to be someone who is really good at critical thinking and breaking down complicated concepts and arguments. You have to be very detail-oriented, almost that anxious personality type, yet also thrive under pressure. It's a rare combination that you find somebody who has both those traits. So that's something else to consider too.
Stephanie's point about having a thick skin, I think, was a really good one. Because so my PhD is in immunology, but I haven't really been an immunologist for 17 or 18 years, right? So the science community would not consider me a scientist at this point, right? I've been doing mostly science education and science outreach, but I have no formal training whatsoever in education. So I would interact with teachers and educators all the time, but they don't consider me an educator, you know? So a lot of times I encounter this, you know, in a way like nobody gives me, you know, credit for, you know, they dismiss me as, well, you used to be a scientist, maybe you're not anymore, or you're not a real educator. It's not, I'm not saying everyone's like that, but you do encounter that sometimes. And at first, when I was sort of first making that transition, that really would get under my skin, it would bug me. And then I realized pretty quickly when I look around at people who, you know, maybe were in grad school with me and have stayed in science, and they're almost all miserable and don't like what they're doing. And then I thought, you know, I love what I do. I have fun going to work every day. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. What do I care what people think about the path that I followed? I've carved out a path that I really enjoy doing, and to me, that's worth a ton, you know? So I think you need to not care so much, you know, if people are going to judge you for, you know, for making a choice to leave the lab or something like that, and just follow your passion and do what you're going to enjoy doing. So.
And before we run out of time, can you talk for a minute about work-life balance?
I'm surprised that hadn't come up yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have great work-life balance. I think it might be different, you know, I guess we're the non-academic one, so maybe people think we have like very awesome work-life balance where it's like you come in at 9, you leave at 5. You come in at 9, you leave at 5. It doesn't, at least with me, it doesn't work that way. And I'm sure hearing everyone else's careers, I'm sure it's similar across the board. But I think, but I think it's easier to manage because you're doing administrative tasks. So you have deadlines, right? And if you're organized, you can kind of set everything up so you're working on, you know, things of low urgency. That aren't due so quickly, you know, those type of things, so you can work in a way that you can maintain work-life balance. I mean, there's some times where we have programs, like yesterday, a program was at 6 to 7:30, so of course I get off at 7:30, but, you know, I make sure to manage those type of things, or our grants are due, so there are certain times where we're there a little bit later, but for the most part, I think because we have more autonomy and more control on how we can schedule certain things, then it makes it a little bit easier than, you know, an experiment where you have like a, you know, 18-hour time course where you're going to be there for 18 hours at some point. So for me, it's actually been more enjoyable. It's a bit better work-life balance than when I was a graduate student or a postdoc.
I'd say for me, it's, you kind of want to understand that it's never really easy. You always feel like you should be doing something else no matter where you are at any point in time. My oldest son was born when I was in graduate school. My daughter was born when, my husband was in graduate school as well. My daughter was born when he was still in graduate school and I had started my postdoc. My second son was born when I was in the industry and my husband was still a postdoc. And then the baby, who's now 8, was born when I came back to academia. So we've kind of had it all sorts of ways. For me, the easiest was when I was in graduate school because it was after I had finished classes and had a very flexible schedule. And we were kind of stupid and didn't know how things worked. So, you know, then you have no expectations for how they should work. So, yeah, so he was, you know, in backpacks with us that he's not, and, you know, doing all the stuff you do in graduate school. Interesting childhood. But then the easiest functionally was when I worked in industry because it was a much more regimented time. So I knew I had to check in at 8, I knew I had checked out at 5, and so for children at the age they were then, kind of the toddler ages, that was really good, very predictable. Now it's very chaotic, and we're all adjusting to it because my last job, I had a lot more time flexibility, even though it was here and it was in administration, it was a different group. So I could work very early and I could leave early and they could get off the bus and we were fine and we could do all of the random after school things that they do at this age. And the job that I have now is a little bit more regimented. I still have to go in very early to get kids to school, but I can't leave early because we have meetings and things. They're supportive of flexible work life, so they say, yes, you can definitely leave early. But what you have to understand is that if you say in this environment I'm going to work 8 to 5, you're going to miss opportunities and you're not going to progress. So you have to develop some flexibility there. But it's worked, and everybody's thriving and alive. We're generally happy.
Really, all you have to do is keep them alive.
That's all you gotta do.
Everything else is gravy.
So I have a pretty good work-life balance. Working on the complex grants, our workload is cyclical, so it gets really, really crazy, and I'm working nights and weekends for 2 or 3 weeks right before a deadline, and then it gets very quiet, and there's not a lot going on. So I also should say that my husband's an attorney, so if he doesn't go to work, the courtroom closes. So pretty much I'm the one. If the kids get sick, I have to leave work in the middle of the day and go get them. He also works an hour away from Durham where we live, so I have to do school drop-off and pick-up every day, which means a 9 to 5 in-office schedule for me. And I'm able to do that in part because what we do is computer-based, so most of the time I can get done what I need to get done in that 9 to 5 window, and just follow up emails in the evening before I go to bed to keep other people moving along. And that works when we're on the deadlines. I'm working like crazy. And I'm like, they show these caricatures of moms, like the natural mom and the PTA mom, and then they show the overwhelmed mom who runs in late with stuff on. Yeah, that's me. But it's partly just my personality, and partly just the struggle I think that a lot of people have trying to do it all and do it all at a high level. You want to be an excellent mom, you want to be excellent at your job, and you do feel tugged in multiple directions. But again, I schedule appointments and everything for the quiet times between the grants. I plan to have things quiet during the deadline periods. I shore up my resources around me. I call the grandma and say, hey, this would be a great weekend for you to come visit. I know I've got something. And again, because it's not all the time, it's cyclical, we found a way to make it work, and everybody's happy in our family. It works well for us.
So I think all three of them do a much better job of it than I do, apparently. I'll be honest, it's a real challenge. I'm in maybe a little bit of a unique situation in that I've been a single parent for the last 11 years. So I've been trying to, so to be honest, my whole life, especially for the last 11 years, has been kids and work. I mean, that's been it pretty much. Fortunately, my kids are awesome and I love them more than anything. And my job is awesome and I've really loved that as well. And so even though those two things have pretty much consumed my whole life, they've been two things that I find really rewarding and really fulfilling. And I'm now at the point where I was telling some people earlier, my son, who's the youngest one, is a senior in high school. So starting in August, I'll be an empty nester, and then I can just work all the time. So maybe I'll find a little bit of a life in there somewhere. But it's been a challenge, and I think for me, the key was not trying the key was sort of accepting that those two things were going to take up all my time, and appreciate that they were two things that I really valued and really made my life feel full and enriched. And if I didn't have a job I love, and if I didn't have two kids that are the most amazing thing in my life, then it would have been a lot tougher for me. But I was always trying to remind myself, hey, I'm one of the luckiest people I know because I've got a job I love and kids I love, and what more do you need? That's great. So.
And there's kind of a new term in vogue that I actually like better as well, work-life integration, because it reflects more of the way that we tend to operate. If there's a critical thing going on at work, well then I can communicate to the family, I know that this is going to be a hard time and we have a lot to do, and the other way around, if there's a critical time at home, I can say, we had this thing scheduled, but I'm just going to have to move it because there's something going on. And it's just what you do.
One last question?
Yeah, I have two quick questions. One is money. How good is the pay compared to probably your industrial postdoc or industrial academic career? And then second is stability. So I know you said that when your grant got over, that job was finished. So do you wake up every morning knowing that you have this job? I mean, that's the only thing about moving to industry that always scares me. So money and stability.
So the job I was in at Nessent, it was a center that was funded for 10 years, and then we extended it to an 11th year. So for 11 years, I knew every day where my paycheck was coming, and I knew when that job was coming to an end. It didn't sneak up on me at all. And I have a lot of friends that work in the park at Cisco and IBM and places like that. And every time I talk to them, they're like, "Oh, this might be the week." So I mean, there's this weird sort of standard that we think we should all have in academia, which is, tenure, right? A job for life, and that's so. Like for most of the world, that's such a weird fantasy that doesn't exist, And, so to me, 10 plus years of knowing where my paycheck was coming from every day was awesome. I mean, that felt like, I wasn't capable of thinking beyond that long anyway. So, it's not as stable as being a fully tenured professor, but it's probably, depending on your funding situation, if it's a 5-year grant or or a permanent position funded by the provost's office or something like that, it's probably as stable as most jobs out there, or more than a lot probably outside of academia.
Well, and even a tenured faculty member in the School of Medicine is only as tenured as his or her last grant.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, I think research development positions are exceptionally stable, especially given the current funding climate right now. A lot of institutions are advancing and scaling up their research development programs because they've seen a large return on investment. A salary for someone like me, is completely covered if I help get even one complex grant that year. So it's very cost effective and it's valued in a field that's growing.
I think the take-home message is grant-based or institutional-based, right? So the grant-based ones, you have a limit on it, but I mean that's a pro and a con, right? Because like Jory said, when that grant is going to expire, and then the institutional ones, like everyone said, they're usually linked to hard money, so it makes it easier for you to have that position because I guess it depends on your performance about your position, your role in that job, but that position probably will stay there. So, yeah.
And salaries vary immensely. So industry money is good, it is. But for the types of positions that we have, I've seen folks go straight from their PhD into an administrative role and start out making more than junior faculty do. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some that start out making something equivalent to a high-level staff assistant. So it varies, and I don't think it's even predictable based on the kind of work that it is. So you'll want to probe and ask when you're looking at those things.
Okay, well on that note, let's thank our panelists.
I forgot to bring cards, but I'll write my email address on the board if anybody wants to follow up with me. I'd be happy.